Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well and enjoying TechShare Pro. So we spoke yesterday about how a simple act of forgetting to do laundry the night before creates this knock-on effect, which eventually results in a meltdown and being unable to function. One of these triggers was a comment on the fact that I was late to work. And if one stressor had been removed, I may have had enough capacity to increase my energy levels and reduce the risk of a meltdown that day. So, how do we design for neurodiversity so that everyone can bring their best self to work and contribute in a way that's meaningful? Today, we're going to be discussing some solutions to the challenges that we shared yesterday, and we'll share a range of different solutions from simple adjustments to some useful technology. We've also tried to write this session so that you don't have to have been at yesterday's session to enjoy and get something out of today's. Oh, it's not. There we go. Go on then, Ashley.
If you just, okay, it's a slight delay in change of slides, but that's good. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley. I have been in the neurodiverse space for about 20 years now and interested in it. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 19. I have spent the last 10 years designing technology and services and supporting organizations with designing stuff for neurodivergent people or disabled people. The first thing that I ever did was build a 3D autism simulation video game, which is available to still see on YouTube. And that really taught me that in spite of the fact I had at that point probably about 10 years of experience because family members were diagnosed as being autistic, I still didn't know everything. So it really set me on this journey of wanting to learn how to design for neurodiversity and everyone. And I'm an accessibility consultant at AbilityNet, if I forgot to say that. Rina.
Hi, I'm Rina. I'm also an accessibility consultant at AbilityNet. I was diagnosed with autism about 5.5 years ago. And in the last sort of 3 years that I've spent here at AbilityNet, I've done a load of talking on my lived experience of kind of neurodiversity and kind of my experiences in the workplace and in higher education as well.
So one of the questions often from kind of businesses and organizations, or one of the assumptions, is that it costs a lot of money to make adjustments for disabled or neurodivergent people. In a book called Neurodiversity at Work, which is in the references, actually the costs are not as high as most people think. It is quoted to cost £75 to implement reasonable adjustments for an entire year. Now, if you compare that to the cost of hiring, which is, according to Glassdoor, an article in 2020, around $3,000 per hire, there's such a huge gap there. And if we also look at the costs of innovation that we are losing out on, and there's been various studies from organizations such as Deloitte that a more diverse workforce leads to more revenues. Kind of putting all of this stuff together, we're kind of paying this unconscious cost by not making our organizations more inclusive. So it's quite difficult to talk about anything related to neurodiversity and design without first understanding the double empathy problem and its implications. So up until 2012, there was this strong idea that essentially autistic people couldn't empathize with others. This was known as theory of mind. Essentially, it put the onus on autistic people that they needed to change. They needed fixed, they needed help, and the problem was on their end. In 2012, an autistic researcher called Damien Milton put forward a theory known as the double empathy problem. Milton argued that it's not that autistic people cannot empathize. Actually, they can empathize in their own and with each other and their own world totally fine. And this is true for, let's say, air quote, neurotypical people who can also socialize and empathize within them amongst themselves fine. The problem is when they try and combine the two worlds, and essentially there exists what we would call an empathy gap, double empathy gap. And this has implications for design. So, I mean, how does knowing this help me become a better designer, policymaker, or leader? Well, first of all, it means being humble. It means knowing that I have blind spots, and that if I create solutions in isolation, it is unlikely they're going to work for people who experience and think about the world differently. And we come from different worlds, so it's different and difficult to imagine someone else's experience. So one approach to solving this, of course, is through co-production or participatory design. They are slightly different. And coming together with these groups early in the design process and making sure that we are including the people in which the designs, policies, etc., will be used. So, for example, where this fails, I was interviewing someone a couple of months ago, and they said that there had been a pub nearby that they'd spent so much money making it super accessible. There was accessible toilets, and even half of the bar would have been lowered so that they could still go on in their wheelchair and order the drinks. Unfortunately, they didn't really road test this very well, and they didn't co-design it because although the people could, once they were in, it was amazing, the actual entrance to the pub was not accessible. Yeah, not great. So hopefully now you've got a little bit of the theory and philosophy behind some of the created solutions. And now we're going to move on to some more concrete actionable tips that hopefully many of you can use in your own organizations.
So the first one we want to talk about is communication. So we spoke yesterday about how we each kind of have different challenges around communication and they have different impacts on us. But there are several things that can be done to benefit both of us, even though we struggle with different things.
So one of them is circulating agendas beforehand and checking when people need those agendas, because everyone might be different. And what that does for me is it lets me keep track of the meeting. There's a challenge often with people who are ADHDers. We might have one important task for a meeting and we might leave that meeting and that will be the only thing that we haven't managed to achieve. So having that kind of agenda and goals in advance is really good. It's also super helpful for information processing so that a person doesn't have to process all the information in the meeting. They can look up and start processing before, thinking of questions, and it helps the meeting run smoother.
So the next one we've got here is defining rules of in-person and of remote communication. So one of the things here is, are there any rules around how to address different people in different roles and status? Should I be talking to, say, my line manager or the head of HR differently to the way I maybe talk to marketing? And another one is interjecting and making yourself heard. And there's a number of things you can do around this. So as someone else in the meeting, you can say, for example, does anyone have any thoughts on that? And leave a bit of time. Let people speak up if they have something to say. Before you finish the meeting, you could say, does anyone else have anything to share? And this gives people the time to think about what they want to say during the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, add it on to the end. It's all about enabling people to get their voice heard. Another way of doing it is allowing people to put notes or comments in the chat. And then coming back to those later. You know, if someone's talking and someone posts something, then when they finish talking, you kind of refer back to that post and say, oh, did you want to say something on this? And they don't have to work out when in the conversation it's appropriate and polite to jump in. I mean, the number of times I've sat there like thinking I want to say something, waiting for a gap to come up. Gaps come up, take a breath, got my words ready. Someone else starts talking. After about like 3 or 4 different instances that happen, I just give up. I'm just like, you know what? I'm not even going to try anymore.
Or I've just interjected on a comment that was related to like five points ago.
yeah.
Because it's like been in my head and I'm waiting for my moment. So yeah, this kind of comes on to the being direct versus being polite. Politeness it's something in the UK that's really, really important. Often it means we have to fill our sentences with lots of, in my view, pointless words to make things sound polite. And if you're asking a neurodivergent person a question, we can be quite direct. And that can be an advantage. It's quite effective, but some people might kind of feel like it's being impolite. So just make sure to ask us, because that's often never going to be the intention. And we're also very honest. So for example, my mom asked my brother, does this like dress make me look fat? And he said, no, Mom, your dress doesn't make you look fat. And she was like, great. He was like, your fat makes you look fat. So I was like, very honest. But yeah, some people might not be keen for that.
Yeah. So our last one here is the 3-second question rule. So this is about asking a question and giving it time to respond. So my little story on this one, I was in a pub with some friends, and we'd finished our meal, and I went up to the bar to ask for the bill, and the lady behind the bar said, "Oh, do you want to pay by card?" Now I was stressed out. I was tired. I'd just driven from like Birmingham to Suffolk or something. I was like so tired, and it felt like an absolute age. It probably wasn't that long, but obviously it was longer than the person behind the bar was expecting, because she asked it like 2 or 3 times before I ended up managing to answer it. And I'm just standing there thinking, stop giving me more information to process. I just need a little bit of time to order my words and get them out of my mouth. It was like right there, but I just couldn't manage to get them out of my mouth. So just giving us a bit of time to process and get the words out can often make a huge difference.
Right. Silence is okay, everyone. Like, it's better than small talk, honestly.
Yeah, I don't care what you did on your weekend. I can see the weather out the window. I don't need to know about that.
Approaches to work. So these are some graphs of some real life last exam results that I found from my last year at university. And what you will notice is there is quite a big gap between the grades that I've got like 80, 90% in, and then I've got these kind of 20s and 30s and things like that, and 40s. And the truth would have been that I would have spent so much more time working on those tasks where I got lower scores, and the other ones I would have spent a lot less time. And just came out with much higher grades. And so if you're looking at kind of assigning tasks, do you have a think about what people are best suited for? Because if it takes me a lot less energy to get to this kind of 90 to 100%, that's amazing. If it takes me a lot of energy and I'm still only getting to 20%, it's going to really look like I'm failing my role, and I'm going to be exhausted as well.
So our next one here is predominantly about eye contact. Yeah, I'm quite I don't want to say political about it. I mean, just jelly balls. Why are they so important? 2 jelly balls in your head, and people put so much value on looking at them. I can actually pay much more attention to the conversation if I don't have to stare into your eyes while I'm talking to you. I mean, how long is even okay? I'll probably spend more time thinking about how long I can look into your eyes before it's weird than I am about what you're saying and how to respond. And if we insist that people constantly make eye contact, then they're probably going to spend more of their energy on a conversation, and you're going to get a lot less out of it than if you just accept the way that they manage the conversation themselves and allow them to kind of pay attention to what they need to pay attention to. So yeah. Don't insist on eye contact and physical contact as well.
And it is unfortunately true that if I'm probably continuing to stare at you, I've probably actually lost my attention span, to be honest. I'm probably not listening. I've like I'm in space right now. So the next one is to show particularly tasks or new activities, new jobs, rather than assumed skills. So one of my siblings, they, for example, were going for a first in a Russell Group university in genetics, but they didn't know the months of the year. I don't know how this has still managed to happen, but someone very, very clever, but they have very different skills. And the other thing as well is, show within the organization it's okay to ask questions by actually doing it, by challenging and asking why. And in terms around office space, there is a resource at the end of the slides, which is work that was done by BBC Cape on creating more neuro-inclusive office environments. But make sure that you co-design your office space and ask what your people actually need, and not just kind of checkbox stuff, because everyone's team is going to be different.
So our next one is around defining roles. What's the expected behavior of someone in a particular role? What's the expected communication roles? Do I have to talk to people differently as a manager compared to as a colleague? And giving those expected roles and behaviors can help people to behave in the most appropriate way for different roles. Who might know about different topics? If you include some sort of guide on who in the organization might know best about something, then you're probably going to get people asking fewer questions at the wrong people and saving time and saving productivity. And our last one, it's not quite what it says there, but it's related. We're back to the smart casual, guys. What does it mean? Define exactly what your expected clothes are in different roles, as well as in different situations. What can you wear? Can I wear jeans and a hoodie? Can I wear jeans but I can't wear a hoodie? How casual is casual, and how smart is smart, and what's the middle ground? Give explicit details and define what clothes are expected in different roles. And then also think about, does it really matter? Do the clothes that people wear really matter? If no clients come into the office, does everyone need to be in business dress? Does that affect their performance?
I'm going to say, I wouldn't mind if my line manager turned up in pajamas, as long as they're good at their role.
Yeah, onesies at work is matter. Yeah, be comfortable.
Exactly. I'd much rather that. So public transport, that's a really big one that we discussed yesterday. And fortunately, a lot of it comes down to flexibility. So enabling people to travel to work at times that they can avoid rush hour. I really enjoy coming into work at lunchtime, because if I've forgotten to do laundry, pick up a prescription, something like that, I can throw laundry in the morning, and I can go and get my prescription at lunch and then kind of head into work, but still being able to work in the morning. Access to work can pay for alternative transport. So if someone is having a particularly bad day, they can look at getting taxis into work. And there's also, again, this thing of be flexible about the place of work. Does it really matter? And if so, if work can't be done from home, for example, why? So I have this thing with often there's so many traditional rules that we've just kind of assimilated and forgotten why and where they came from. There was this experiment done with basically put some monkeys in a cage, and every time the scientists offered the monkeys a banana, the monkeys would all be sprayed with water. So slowly they learned, don't try and get the banana because they'll be sprayed with water. So then they took out one of those monkeys and they replaced it with a new monkey. The new monkey saw the banana, tried to jump to get it, and all the monkeys jumped on top of him to stop him from getting it. So that new monkey came in and realized, okay, don't go for the banana. And slowly over time, they kept replacing the monkeys until there was none of the original ones in the cage. And still, every time the banana was offered, none of the monkeys would take it. But also, none of the monkeys knew why. They just kind of adapted and took on this habit and behavior over a period of time. And that's sometimes how I see a lot of rules in the workplace. And so it's really important to ask why. The next slide. So there's a couple of different things on here, tips. I'm just going to take two. Access to work for me has been unbelievably helpful, getting someone to help and support my job and role. And the second one is laundry apps. If I know that I'm really not sticking on top of my laundry, this app basically will come, pick up my clothes, take it away, dry it, clean it, fold it up, bring it back within 24 hours. And that takes off a lot of load from life admin.
So the couple that I really like out of this list, my noise cancelling headphones, honestly, they make so much difference. If I'm like really overwhelmed or struggling with sensory stimulation, I can put the noise cancelling headphones on and I can go into a supermarket and do my weekly shop that I may not otherwise be able to do with all of the beeping and the alarms and the noise. It's sometimes so overwhelming that the only way I can go and do my shopping is to use noise cancelling headphones so that I can't hear any of that. And then occasionally I have to like get someone else to go do it because I can't even do it then. But it makes a massive difference and I can do it a lot more than I would be able to without. And then smart home technology. I mean, I have all of my lights in my flat set to come on and turn off at certain times of the day. So if I'm trying to wake up and I'm struggling a little bit and I notice my bedroom light turns off, I'm like, oh boy, I really need to get out of bed because I'm supposed to be working now. And that kind of external sensory stimuli really gets me out of bed. Like I start panicking at that point. I'm like, pajamas working. And that kind of sensory stimulus is much easier for me to respond to than just like a notification on my phone that's like, oh look, it's come up. I'll deal with that later. So yeah, I really like smart home technology. I think it's great.
So the last slide here is on leadership, and this of course could be a talk within its entire self. But just to kind of bridge it down to 60 seconds or so, for me, I really want leaders that you can ask these questions, you can ask why. It builds trust if someone can explain why the rules exist and the rationale behind them. And also to have leaders that encourage us to actively ask questions instead of just blindly following the rules. A lot of people who are neurodivergent might have been told off for asking questions in the past. And so you might be thinking about, am I going to be fired if I raise that there's a problem, or if the workplace finds out that I've got a hidden disability? So some of the ways in which I would love for leaders to help this is to be proactive in asking people how they feel and not just waiting until staff to tell them. Often some organizations might have monthly catch-ups, which is great. You want to make sure really that those are spaces for actually being able to raise concerns and not just talking about objectives, and it's like a checkbox exercise again, not really going to build trust. And ideally just being able to ad hoc, being able to speak to your line manager as a problem arises, this kind of open door policy. So, a manager can just say, okay, on Friday to the team, I've got a couple of free hours. Feel free to schedule some one-to-one time with me so we can talk about anything that has come up throughout the week. And I guess we'll close with a quote, which to me is probably the most important thing in all of this, especially looking at the problems created yesterday, which is to be kind is more important than to be right. Many times it is not brilliant minds that speaks, but a special heart. It's not brilliant mind that speaks, but a special heart that listens, which is what people need. So yeah, thank you for listening. I think the next slide, Rina, has oh yeah.
We found this picture and we had to put it in because we love it. So effectively, yeah, we just want the end of working day for everyone to be walking home looking like this. Because, we want everyone to be happy, enjoy their jobs, not feel super stressed out by being at work. So yeah, hopefully we can change something for the better, and someone walks home from work like this.
Every day should feel like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Any questions?
take any questions. And I think on the next slide there is a list of resources which I think that's going to be available for later, but we can go back to the questions slide for now. So the top question that I can see is from Kinga, and it's, have you got any cheat sheets on how neurodiverse brains work differently? Something that could be useful to share with work. It's a very good question, and I don't personally have any cheat sheets for this. I have been thinking actually of making them, because when I was doing a lot of cognitive science to build the simulation, I was doing a lot of investigation of what's different between ADHD and autistic brains. There are differences, but unfortunately, I don't know of any resources. Rina, do you know of any?
I'm not aware of any, but I kind of want to make some now. So I might look into making some of those, because I think they could be quite useful.
Right, it gives you like the actual, here's the science research, this is how the brains work differently. ADHD, great with divergent creativity, not so good with convergent creativity, gestalt perception, things like that. There are lots of books available, especially for autistic people, on the autistic mind, but I don't know that many actually on the science of ADHD. The next question is from Jamie and Lion.
So that one is, if you could change one thing about meetings, what would it be and why? I think for me, there's a couple of things, and it depends on what meeting it is. So I think if it's
one thing, Rina, one thing.
Can I not do one thing for each type of meeting?
Okay, that makes sense. It's a good point.
If it's like a big meeting that's organized for ages, agendas, full agendas of what is going to go on in the meetings. If it's like short ad hoc meetings, I think it's just giving me time to process, because I've not had that agenda. It's the time to process what you're saying and what the topic is, and think about what I need to say in response.
That's cool. I hadn't even thought about the fact that there would be one thing to change for different types of different meetings. For me, I think just overall keeping meetings shorter. We've defined this thing of an hour. And like, who said that the day has to be split up into this 24 segments of 60 minutes? If you go back and look at China, and you can see that I've felt quite strongly about this before, they actually used to split their days up into 100th. So like, we've kind of assigned this 1 hour meeting thing to 60 minutes, but like, again, why? And it's just how things have evolved. They don't need to be 60 minutes. So for me, the one thing to change would be how long meetings typically are. Ideally, that would be like 30 minutes max.
That'd be interesting, having a 30-minute meeting.
Yeah.
On like
some
like really complex topic. What else have we got in here? What are your thoughts on the role of environment and sensory barriers on employment for neurodivergent people? I think there's a few different things in the kind of environment and the sensory element of it, but I think it's also very personal. I think it's very important to talk to the person that you're thinking about, or just talk in general to your employees, and see what they need from their working environment. I think that's the main thing for me.
Right. Every person is different.
Yeah.
And it would change different for different days as well. I think this is probably the end. So thank you everyone for attending. It's been really great, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of TechShare Pro.
Thanks, guys.